Hi guys, it's Izzy and welcome to today's video. I feel like are we at a normal angle? Are we usually further back? I can't tell. But yes, in today's video I'm going to be doing the mid-year book freakout tag for two reasons. One, because it's like the middle of the year, so it's time to freak out. And two, it was my first ever video that I ever made. I guess I'll leave it in the cards if you want to go and see it, but like I wouldn't suggest it because I was really awkward. But yeah, it was the first video I made and I've been on BookTube officially a year now. It was my BookTube anniversary on the 9th of June, and so yeah, I wanted to do this video because it's the middle of the year and also to celebrate my 1 year on BookTube, and I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who supported me for the last year. It's honestly been such an amazing experience and I'm so glad I decided to make that first video, even if it is really cringy now, but you know, we've got to live with it. Sorry if the light keeps changing. It's like quite sunny outside, but the clouds keep going over, so I feel like it might change continually. Do you like my top? It's got little, can't really see, those weird little dog cat things, but it's cute. And if you think I have a weird nail, it's because I tried to scratch off one of those things you're supposed to scratch with a coin, and I did it with my nail. Now I can't get rid of it, so yeah, that was fun. But let's get on with the tag. There are a few questions I omitted just because they weren't particularly relevant, but I have the questions, I have my answers, I have my books, so we should get started. The first question is the best book you've read so far in 2020, and this was so hard to narrow down. I have read 125 books so far this year. As we stand, it's the 13th of June, and that means I've read a lot of good books, but I managed to narrow it down to like my top three, which I was quite impressed with. God knows how I'm going to do my best books of 2020, like this is going to be a mess. But the first, and if you know, I mean, if this is your first video of mine, you won't know this, but if you've watched literally any of my other videos, do I even need to answer this question? My favourite book of the year is, of course, King of Crows by Liv Bray, which is the fourth and final book in the Diviners series. I almost forgot this one because I read it in January and I literally forgot that was even this year. And I was like, what's my favourite book? And then I was like, wait, I read this year? Honestly feels like forever ago. And I don't need to explain why I love this so much. It will be coming up in a lot of these questions, I'm sorry, but the Diviner series is a historical fiction fantasy series about a group of teenagers living in New York in the 1920s who have magical powers and need to take down evil, and it's the best series ever, so... My other two favourites I don't actually own, sadly, because they're kind of hard to get hold of in the UK. But the first one being The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune, and this is a beautiful adult book about someone playing Harry Potter music. Someone was playing Harry Potter music, that's weird. Yeah, it's an adult book about this man who is basically a social worker but for magical children in this world, and he goes to stay at this like orphanage, but it's not really an orphanage, but it's kind of an orphanage, to like see if these children are being looked after properly and just to kind of see like where they're at. And he stays there for a month, and some of the children that live there, one's the Antichrist, one's a gnome, one's a green blob that wants to be a bellhop. It's great, and yeah, it's just about love and family and healing from trauma, and it's just the like loveliest, most comforting book ever, and I just love it so much. And the third book is Dangerous Remedy by Kat Dunn, which is a book that is set during the French Revolution. It's a YA kind of fantasy, but it's set in France, and it follows a group of teenagers who will jailbreak people. Doesn't matter which side of the revolution they're on, they're kind of like a neutral party. And one time they tried to jailbreak this girl and find out she's a lot more valuable than they first anticipated, and she could have the power to like change the Revolutionary War. And it's just so amazing. It's a debut book, which is just crazy because the writing and the atmosphere is just incredible, and the plot is so exciting, and so you just don't know what's going to happen next, and it's just such a brilliant book. You can't actually get a physical copy yet, but it is out on ebook. Everyone needs to read it, okay? Just trust me, you'll want to read. I mean, read all of these books, but oh my god, the lighting. Can you not? Weather? Like, can you not? The next question is the best sequel you've read in 2020. And for that, I'm going to say We Unleash the Merciless Storm by Taylor K. Mejia. This is the second book in a duology. The first book being We Set the Dark on Fire. I did actually get an ARC of this, so I love it very much, and I'm so happy that I loved it because now I have like an ARC copy, which is so exciting. I'm just going to leave it here while I talk about it. And this is a series that follows two girls, Carmen and Danny, who in this world are trained up to be wives, basically. And it follows the two of them as they enter the home of this rich political man, and they kind of hate each other at the beginning, but then they kind of like befriend each other and kind of team up, and there's like a revolution plot line. And this second book was just so good. The first book is written from Danny's perspective, and then this book is written from Carmen's perspective, which was really cool because they're like very different and have very different backgrounds. And I just loved this. It's like a sapphic romance, which is so good. It's one of the best sapphic romances, and I just love all the themes of this series, and it's just a brilliant duology, and I think it was just pretty perfect, to be honest. The next is new releases that have been released but you haven't read yet and want to. And for me, I own both of them and I'm so excited to get to them. One is Late to the Party by Kelly Quindlen. And this book I got for my birthday, which was only a couple of weeks ago. I turned 21 on the 27th of May, and I got this book for my birthday from a very lovely person who sent it to me and like literally made my life because I wanted this book so bad. And it's basically a book about a girl who realizes that she hasn't really had a lot of teen experiences and she hasn't really lived her high school life to the best of her abilities, and she's in senior year and kind of wants to change that. And I believe it's a sapphic romance, and it's just about a girl discovering herself and like just figuring herself out. And I've had multiple people like in particular tell me that I'm gonna love this book. Like, it was already on my most anticipated releases of 2020, but to have people like actually tell you that they think a book is gonna be one of your favorites, like that's a strong recommendation, because like that's just like hardcore if someone like actually is like, I know who's gonna love this. So I'm super excited to read that. And the other book is Good Girl Bad Blood by Holly Jackson. This is the second book in a series, the first being A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, and it's a young adult mystery thriller series. I don't really know if you have to like read the first one to read the second one, but I loved the first one. It almost made it into the first question of best books of the year, but just not quite. But it's fantastic. And this came out in April and I pre-ordered it, but then I couldn't read for a few weeks because I was too poorly, and so then I just had to like catch up on my arcs, and then I just haven't had the chance to read it. But I'm so excited because the first one just blew me away. Like, it was insane. The next question is most anticipated release for the second half of 2020. This answer probably would have been different before because so many book releases have been pushed back. So it's kind of messed up with the whole schedule, but I have 5 books that I'm like the most hyped for. I won't go into details because I won't explain all of them because you probably know what they are. The first one being The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. Do I need to say any more? We're all collectively so hyped for this book. The second one being Loveless by Alice Oseman. Alice Oseman is one of my all-time favourite authors. She's definitely in the top 5, if not the top 3. And Loveless is a story she's written about an Arrow Ace girl at university, figuring out her life, and I just know it's going to be incredible. And the next one is Hollowpox by Jessica Townsend, which is the 3rd book in the Nevermore series, which is one of my all-time favourite series and a book I've been so hyped for. The second book came out in November 2018, so it'll be almost 2 years since the last book came out, and I need it. Then Tower of Nero by Rick Riordan is the 5th and final book in the Trials of Apollo series, which I'm super hyped for. If you've watched any of my videos, Rick Riordan is like my favourite author. And finally, The Lost Book of the White, which is the 2nd book in the Elder Scrolls series by Cassandra Clare and Wesley Chu. The first book was the Red Scrolls of Magic, yes, and that was one of my favourite books of last year, so I'm super excited for the sequel. The next question is the biggest disappointment of 2020, and for me that was going to be Lady Midnight by Cassandra Clare. I have a weird relationship with Cassandra Clare. Like I said, the Red Scrolls of Magic is one of my favourite books, and she wrote it, whereas the Mortal Instrument series by her I despised. And then I reread The Infernal Devices in anticipation of Chain of Gold, and I really actually enjoyed The Infernal Devices. It was a reread, but I'd read it like 5 years ago, so I didn't remember all that much, and it's not my favourite series by any means, but it was really like just a solid series. And then I'll mention it later, but I read Chain of Gold and I absolutely adored it. So I was on a real Cassandra Clare high, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to give the Dark Artifices a go. And I just really did not like it, like at all. And I count it as my biggest disappointment because if I'd read it after just reading The Mortal Instruments, I would have had no expectations for it. But after reading like The Infernal Devices and Chain of Gold and the Red Scrolls of Magic, I was like, maybe it's going to be great. Maybe I'm missing out. But I just found it like just the Mortal Instruments 2.0. It felt very repetitive, it felt very cliche. The romance is the identical romance. Like, I'm so sick of Cassandra Clare and her forbidden romances. Like, we've had enough. Except in Chain of Gold, then we stan. It was just very cliche, very boring, and I didn't really like any of the characters. I may read Lord of Shadows just for, like, curiosity, but yeah, that was my biggest disappointment. The next question is biggest surprise, and for that one I'm going to go with Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. Like I said, I was quite excited for it after rereading The Infernal Devices. If you don't know, it follows on from like the Shadowhunter world in the 1800s, which is where The Infernal Devices is set, and it follows the characters in that, their children. So it takes place in like the early 1900s around there in London, and I just loved it. It wasn't a perfect book, I will say that, and usually a book won't get 5 stars unless I have like no criticisms, and I did have 1 or 2 criticisms for this book, but I fell in love with it so hard that like the criticisms I had didn't even really matter because I loved the good things so much that it just really overshadowed any disappointments or any issues I had. I just loved the characters, I loved the plot. It was just so engaging, so intriguing. The plot was really diverse and every character had a complex backstory and was a really developed character, and this was a big cast, so that was not an easy job. and I just think it was a phenomenal book, and I loved it so much, and it was definitely a surprise, because I think I expected to enjoy it, just because, one, it's historical fiction fantasy, which is like my favourite combination of genres, and I'd heard like it was quite diverse, and yeah, I loved it. I thought it was fabulous, and I can't wait for the second book, and I do plan on actually buying a copy of it, which is crazy because I rarely buy copies of books because I listen to the audiobook, and I rarely buy books that I already read via, like, if it was from my library or if it was on audiobook. So yeah, it was an impressive book, and I'm so glad I read it. The next question is favourite new author, and this was kind of hard because a lot of the books I read this year were debuts, and so I can't really count someone as my favourite author until I have read 2 or more of their books personally, because you don't know whether it's just like a one book hit or whether it's going to be a consistent thing. But for me, my favourite author that I've discovered this year is TJ Klune. He was the author of The House in the Cerulean Sea, and also a book I recently finished, The Extraordinaries, which was a young adult book about superheroes and a boy with ADHD, and like, he was kind of just all over the place and just a really chaotic, messy teenager, trying to become a superhero himself. He's kind of in love with his best friend, Seth, and it was just so funny, so fun and entertaining, and I've just realised I absolutely adore his writing, and I think the strongest thing he can do is characters. He just creates the most heartfelt, deep, complex characters who you just automatically fall in love with. Like, it's so impressive, and I do plan to read like all of his books because I just think he's a really, really talented author. The next question is newest favourite character, and I really couldn't choose or really even decide. I was really unsure about this because usually I only fall in love with characters if they're in a series. I struggle to fall in love like strongly with a character if it's just like one book. So I just decided to go with one, Nick from The Extraordinaries by TJ Klune, because he was so funny and relatable, and he was messy and weird, and I just connected to him so much, and I felt a real kinship with him. And the second choice I had is just the cast of Chain of Gold, because I literally love the entire cast. It's crazy. I'm not even sure I could like choose my favourite character just from Chain of Gold because I love them all so much. By the way, I did write a really detailed review of Chain of Gold, so I'll leave that in the description below if you want to hear more of my thoughts about it. But my top 3 characters were Cordelia Carstairs, Lucy Herondale, and Matthew Fairchild. They were my top 3. The next question is a book that made you cry, and I have 3 for this answer. First of all, let's be real. I sobbed through probably a good, like, this much of the book. I wept through it. My family were genuinely concerned because I wept for hours on end, and when I finished it I just kept weeping because no words. The second book is A Heart and a Body in the World by Deb Coletti. This is a story of a girl who is a survivor of a very traumatizing event that happened, and she decides that she's going to run across America to she originally starts it to kind of run away from her life and the guilt and everything she's feeling relating to what happened to her. And then along the way, she kind of finds ways to work through her trauma. She has the support of her family and friends, and she does have a therapist. and she meets people along the way, and she's like left alone with her thoughts for, you know, large chunks of time because she's a runner. And it's just an absolutely beautiful book about trauma and healing and family, and it's just, honestly, I have no words for how beautiful a book it is. And if you are going to read it, just check for trigger warnings. I knew what the event was before going into it, even though the book doesn't reveal it until like maybe the last 10%. But it didn't ruin my experience at all knowing what the event was. So if you are someone like me who can be triggered by certain events, just check like what it is to make sure you're okay reading it. But yeah, it's just phenomenal. And the third book is Music from Another World by Robin Talley, which is another book that almost made it to my favourites at the beginning. But it is a book about two girls who become pen pals in the 1970s, and one of them is gay and they're like Catholic, and she comes out to her family and is rejected. And it's just a beautiful book about friendship, community, romance, and it's just such a good book. But the ending made me cry from happiness, really. It was just such a beautiful ending, and it just made my heart happy, and they were happy tears for once, which is rare for me, but it was a stunning book. Next question is a book that made you happy, and for me that is Only Mostly Devastated by Sophie Gonzalez. This was a debut that came out in February, I think. I read the arc of it and also bought my own copy because I loved it so much. And this is a queer Greece retelling and follows two boys who have a summer romance, and they think it's going to end at the end of the summer, but one of the boys stays where he was on vacation, and they end up at the same school, but the other boy is not out, and it just follows them traversing a relationship, and it's so funny, so happy. The main character is so optimistic and just a really lovely character. There is some grief. He loses a family member, so those bits are obviously not happy, but the rest of the book is just such a warm hug. I just love it so much. Next question is favourite review you've written this year, and that would be my review I wrote for King of Crows by Libba Bray. It was such a hard review for me to write because I just have so many feelings attached to this series, and I just had no idea how I was going to wrap up all my feelings for this book in particular. But I'm really proud of how it came out. I'll leave it down below again if you want to check it out, and probably my second would be the review I wrote for Chain of Gold. So if you want to read into why I love these books, then I will leave that in the description box. The penultimate question is the most beautiful books you have bought this year, and that is a tie. Not that I bought either of these, but I got them for my birthday, and that is a tie between The Animals of Lockwood Manor by Jane Healey. This is like the special edition, and it has like this beautiful sprayed edges pattern, and just like look at this cover, just like look, like I'm sorry, but who gave you the right to look this beautiful? Like, honestly, why does every book not look like this? And I have my wonderful bookish friends to thank for getting me this beautiful signed special edition, and I love it so much, and I can't wait to read it, and I'm so grateful to have it because just looking at it makes me happy, so let alone reading it. And the other book it was also a present I got for my birthday from family friends, and that is this copy of Anne of Green Gables by Ellen Montgomery. I love Anne of Green Gables. It's one of my favourite classics, and it's definitely my favourite children's classic. But this is the Puffin in Blooms collection, and I just love this collection so much, and I just had to get this one. And I also have the Little Women Puffin in Blooms one, which I also love very much, but I think this one is just comes out on top just because I love the colours so much. And the final questions are, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? And honestly, so many, but I managed to narrow it down to 3 books that I know I'm gonna love, and I know I need to read them, okay? I'm sorry, okay, I need to read these. The first one being Girls of Storm and Shadow. How many times have I said I'm going to read this? So many. Something always gets in the way. I don't know why, but the world just doesn't want me to read this book. He knows it would be too powerful. But this book is the sequel to Girls of Paper and Fire, which is one of my favourite books of last year and just like of all time. And I need to read this book because it's criminal that I haven't read it yet because I love the first one so much. The second book being The Book Thief by Marcus Cusack. I only discovered my love for historical fiction in September last year, I think, and since then I've just been like obsessed. But I still haven't read like the cult classic of historical fiction, which is of course The Book Thief. Don't hate me. And the final book that I really need to read is Like a Love Story by Abdi Nazemian, I think is how you say it. And this is a queer story set during the AIDS epidemic, and it has an Iranian protagonist, I believe. And yeah, I just know I'm gonna love this book, and I just need to read it. Again, these are books like I go to pick up and then just something happens in my life, which means I can't read them, and I just think they're cursed, and I'm cursed. So love that for me. But yeah, that is just about everything. That was my mid-year book freakout tag. I hope you enjoyed me talking about my reading so far. And yeah, if you've been a subscriber since day one, you're the best, because literally who subscribed to me in that first video, I was a hot mess. So if you were one of them, legend. But I'm just, even if you just subscribed today, I'm thankful to each and every one of you. Thank you so much for the support in the last year, and I look forward to this next year on BookTube. I love it so much. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. In all my videos for at least this month, I will be leaving resources in the descriptions for books by Black authors that you should be reading, and ways to support the Black Lives Matter movement. They will be in the description down below, so you can check them out. And yeah, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in a year. Well, you'll see me before then, but I'll see you for the next year. What am I even saying? Is it easy to stop? Okay, bye.